Yeah, I'm with Natalie. I'm trying to figure out WebEx is saying it needs access to my
Okay,
camera, but
excellent.
it's
Well,
not that easy actually.
okay. Well, I hear you. That's the most important thing right now. We'll figure out the video portion of it in just a moment. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
We see your Monday morning face on. Thank you so much.
Okay, yeah.
Morning. Good morning. Yeah. Every day.
Testing one. Good morning. Good morning. 12.
I think I've got it.
We see you, Natalie.
Oh, good. Yeah, I was under the desk for a bit, uh, trying to sort out a couple of new devices.
The world of tech.
Yeah, I usually have my resident pro, my husband, but he's not around right now, so I had to, you know, had to go at it myself. Now I need to get this dust out of my eye.
Should we start? Well, hold on a second.
I think you remember. No, some action show. Yeah. And then it's been. But it's nice. You didn't get it, especially on the bar. Oh, it's.
I'm excited, excited to learn.
But
Well, that's our official.
yes.
It's showing like.
I was thinking of that.
Yeah. Oh. That's it. Um. Yes. So, should I just be? I'll just let people know that it is their problem. Yes, apologies for the late start, everyone. I will now call to order the Civic Engagement Commission's public meeting. I want to welcome everyone, people who are here in person, remotely, and also want to thank everyone on the team for contributing, particularly Abby, for helping us set this up, and our partners, the video vendor, and also our captionist. Thank you so much for joining us. Just want to caution that we are live people into our meetings is to live stream. However, we are in a space where we have not been met before. So we are working off of, I'm told, a super strong Wi-Fi. However, we're not sure about how this connection stability is going to work for the duration of the meeting. So if for some reason the call drops, we will try to get it back. And if we can't, we will, in accordance to the open meeting guidelines, post the recording on our site after the meeting. We will also join the meeting by phone. So if the video isn't working, you can join by audio. And for those who have, the commissioner should have the number where you could dial into if the video doesn't work. For anyone who's here as a member of the public, welcome, and we look forward to connecting with you. Please, for those online and also in person, we welcome you to join the Civic Engagement Commission's mailing list. You can go to our website at nyc.gov/civic engagement and go to the tab that's marked Get Involved and sign up for the newsletter, and you'll be able to stay in touch with our activities. So we have reserved the last 30 minutes of the meeting for public comment. That is not required in a public meeting setting. However, we wanted to open up the meetings to members of the public to comment. So we've kind of done that from the very beginning. I'm hoping that we can do something along those lines. Today, however, we got started late. So just want to acknowledge that we may not be able to stick to a full 30 minutes. If you are a member of the press and here, please do share your contact information either with a member of the team or online. You can also email us at info@civicengagement.nyc.gov. I'm going to start by taking attendance just to make sure that we have a quorum, and so you hear all the commissioners. Here, Geo Barnes, Amy Breedlove. Okay.
On the phone.
Hi, Natalie DeVito,
Here, present.
Mark Diller,
Here, thank you.
Donna Gill. Is Donna on the line? Is Donna Gill on the line? No. Okay. Anthony Harmon. Ishrat Jahan, I know she has class. Edwin Maxwell.
Present.
Lillian Perez. Anastasia Somoza.
Hi, I'm here virtually on WebEx.
Hello.
Hi.
Mitch. Great. Okay, thank you, Said, and I am the Chair, Executive Director of the Civic Engagement Commission. We have a lot of things to share with you today about all the great work of the team. And we are going to be showing 2 videos. We also have a couple of guest speakers who are both who are from our participatory budgeting implementation partners. We have representatives from Unidad Ife, South Queens Women's March, and Common Point. And we'll also be hearing from the executive director of the Commission on Racial Equity, which was just created by voters in the last election in November. So the first thing on the agenda is just to review and approve the minutes that were emailed. We also have them printed out in the folder for you. So or corrections to the minutes as they're presented. For we covered the resolution relating to remote appearance due to extraordinary circumstances whereby commissioners are authorized to use video conferencing to conduct public meetings subject to certain requirements. This was a resolution that we adopted in the last meeting. So are there any additions or corrections to the minutes as presented?
Seeing none, I move to approve.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any
I,
opposed? Okay, we are unanimously approving the minutes.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
sorry to interrupt. May
Yeah.
I just wanted to apologize in advance that to my commissioner colleagues and to the public, they're rolling out outdoor dining at the end of this week. And so I'm going to be called to another meeting. And so I apologize that I'll have to leave this one early. It has got nothing to do with anything anybody says. It is simply
you
a
for
busy schedule. So I apologize, but thank you.
thank you for clarifying in advance. So now we are going to, just to go over some technology. I guess I was supposed to do that. I messed that up. So let's see. We are asking commissioners to mute your mics when you're not speaking. And also online participants, please mute your microphones when you're not speaking. We will call participants if they have registered for public comment in the order that they registered. If not, if you're here and you want to offer a public comment, you could speak with Abigail. Abby, can you raise your hand? And do so in the next half hour, and we will try to add you to the on to program updates. A lot is happening at the commission, and I also want to, before I start with the program updates, really want to thank everyone on the team who has been working incredibly hard over the past couple of months. More specifically, there have been moments where it's been all hands on deck moments, including doing things like entering data or supporting our borough assembly committee meetings and creating this new deck that we're going to share an overview with you that's like a Civics 101 deck. So I just truly want to thank everyone on the team for all of the incredible contributions and insights they've brought to the work, including showing up and being present at some of the Borough Assembly committee meetings, facilitating them, just helping us be more organized and on track. So in the first update, we have the Pulsite Language Assistance Program. We are now getting ready to prepare. We're preparing for the April 2nd presidential primary, and this involves working with vendors to help set up deliver also prepare the materials that we give out to interpreters Jay is helping to organize all of the translations that need to happen for the ballots. And so actually before that, we worked with interpreters during the Borough Assembly Committee process as well. For anyone who needed interpreters, we provided them in the committee meetings. And we had in different boroughs use the use of Spanish and Arabic interpreters, which is great. And then for voting, we've gone through a process which you'll hear about in a little bit, of going through all of the participatory budgeting projects that were suggested during the idea generation phase. We have gone through a process of vetting those projects and narrowing down projects that will be appearing on the ballot that will then be, people will be able to vote on that. And what we do in this period is get those ballot forms ready. And part of getting that ready is actually translating the ballots so that they're ready for people to fill out who speak other languages. We are going to be translating it into all of the local law languages, the ballots. So yeah, so that's another language access update. And then I'm going to now turn it over to Benjamin, I guess, to comment on the community boards as well as the Borough Assembly Committee.
Hello, Sonia. I think there's a slide coming up for that. Yes, next slide. Yes. So this is sort of just a simple rundown of some of the workshops we've done since January and February with some of our attendance numbers. We did a great series of housing workshops in partnership with HPD, who also brought in Department of Buildings and Human Rights Commission. And then we all did our own, for the first time that I've been there, we did our own language access workshops open to all board members as usual. We've had pretty good attendance. I think it's been exciting to see people show up. They're really interested. HPD has become a regular partner. We're going to be doing more fair housing and affordable housing workshops with them. They feel our venue is a good way to reach as many board members in a single shot as they can. We'll also be doing some upcoming conflict resolution workshops, independent budget office workshops, and some others to be announced. So I think we've learned some good things this time. I mean, we've been pretty consistent at about 45% registration or attendance based on registration for online. So we've been consistent with that. We're trying to keep that up. We have adopted a new time of doing the meetings at noon as well as 6:30, which seems to be pretty popular. So I guess people like to spend their lunch hours learning about city services. Yeah, I think we do some feedback surveys. The responses have been very positive. Thankful for us having them. We have about 10 boards that we determined have never attended a meeting, and we're going to be doing outreach to those also across the city to find out how to get the word out to them and to get their members in. So we look forward to the rest of this season and then starting again in the fall. So thank you. Yes, Trevor.
Just wanted to know that the February 13th session in the evening that was not as well attended as the others that you have, that was a night when the Office of Emergency Management sent around a warning for severe weather. And so that's no reflection on your participation that people were listening to OEM.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, there are a lot of things we conflict with and some we have no control over. Great. Yeah, this is just some of the upcoming workshops we have, as I said, that we're looking forward to doing and continuing to get the word out. So is the next slide. So I guess I'll speak to these. You can see that we are in the second cycle of participatory budgeting. the people's money process. We just completed the assembly meetings, which we have a slide on coming up. We'll be getting into the voting period May 1st through June 12th, which will be really exciting. Again, citywide voting. Everybody in the city 11 years older and up can vote, regardless of any status, citizenship or incarceration or otherwise. So we're looking forward to that. And we're, of course, in the process of implementing the 46 projects, which you'll hear more about later. Next. Yeah, for the assembly meetings, it's really a great innovation that we've done in the participatory budgeting process. Quite typically, certainly in the city council process, and I think in others, the evaluation across the city, you really need to know what projects are that are going to end up on the ballot. And that's usually done in a very small controlled group, sort of maybe a group of volunteers, something not as public facing as the vote and the idea sessions. But we've brought in these citizen assemblies models to create our borough assemblies, where we use 20 or so people that are randomly selected that have applied to be on these from across each borough. In each borough, we use about 20 to 25 people to really spend a concentrated amount of time. So you can see there, we had over 1,100 applicants, which is amazing that there's that many people across the city to want to be part of this. We ended up with about 106 spread across the 5 boroughs. They had 6 meetings. They had a 4-hour meeting at the beginning, ended up being 3 because, again, we had a weather situation on our opening meeting, but then they had 4 meetings that were 2.5 hours, and they ended up with another 3.5 hour meeting at the end. Deliberating, we brought in subject matter experts for them to understand a little more about their boroughs. It helped us end up with the final ballot. So we had over 430 ideas across all the 5 boroughs, and they brought it down to 46 ideas that all ended up on the 5 ballots, 10 in every borough except Staten Island, which has 6. And you can see some of the feedback we got there. It's been consistent. It's the same it was last year when we did this for the first time. It was an honor to be part of the team, one of the best experiences they've had so far, and it was an empowering experience. So they are all really excited about being part of PB and the People's Money as we move forward. And we look forward to having them because I think they're now really powerful spokesmen for the People's Money and the ability to have a say in how the city budget gets spent. Yeah, now we have a short video.
We are at 4 of the Brooklyn Borough Assembly Committee meetings, the CEC.
We did a video like this for each borough, which is really exciting to see. They're posted throughout the process.
We are at session 4 of the Brooklyn Borough Assembly Committee meetings, the CEC's citywide participatory budgeting process, the People's Money. Phase 1 is idea. Phase 2 is project vetting and development, and phase 3 is voting.
Growing up in Brooklyn, I've seen a lot of changes, and I think just seeing the diversity in the room and everyone's real life experience, you see that everyone is being represented.
And I find Brooklyn to be one of the best communities to be in.
Many people don't really know about where the money's being allotted to, which communities that they can impact and that they can help.
You need to know where your money is being spent. So it's good to know exactly where it's going.
Thank you. I was at least one meeting in every borough except Staten Island to go watch people talk about their projects, talk about what's important to them in their neighborhoods, really working together. They've never met each other. There might be an occasional person that knows somebody, but they've never met their other members. And they really just work so well together, are so dedicated to finding what really their community needs and put those projects on the ballot. So It's really amazing to see. 106. Yeah.
Working together and New Yorkers owe the Borough Assembly Committee's 106 members. The Borough Assembly Committee is great thanks because they are the ones responsible for going through hundreds of ideas and narrowing them down. And the public will be able to vote on a narrower set of ideas. So thank you so much, Benjamin, for those updates. Next, we are going to hear from the star of that video, Hayden John, who's also a new member of a full-time employee of the Civic Engagement Commission. So Hayden will be is responsible for managing our tree partnerships program and working with the full staff on that work stream. And Hayden will provide an update on what we are doing with the tree coalitions.
Thank you, Dr. Said. So as you all know, through the TREE initiative, the CEC partners with community-based organizations throughout 33 high neighborhoods in New York City that were hardest hit by COVID to promote civic engagement area. It's on in 33 tree neighborhoods is responsible for convening a coalition of a minimum of 3 organizational partners and additional community stakeholders to support the initiative's deliverables. So most recently, they met to co-create talking points for the tree partner to share at Borough Assembly Committee meetings. And the next meeting they have coming up is to co-develop the participatory budgeting phase 3 voting plan with the tree partner. Next slide, please. And then TREE has been instrumental in implementing citywide participatory budgeting. In phase 1, of course, they hosted idea generation sessions throughout the city. In phase 2, they shared priority needs for their neighborhoods at their respective Borough Assembly Committee meetings to help inform the borough ballot. And for phase 3, they will be working with their coalition partners as well as activating volunteers in their neighborhoods to reach a goal of 2,000 ballots per tree neighborhood with an emphasis on tree resident votes. Next slide, please. And then lastly, the third component is civic education. So this spring, our partners will be piloting a new civic engagement workshop developed by the CEC team, led by Anthony and Dan, some outreach coordinators, aim to define civic engagement in terms of power, love, building, movement, and of course, participatory. Thirdly, call participatory budgeting. So lastly, without sharing the whole deck, we wanted to highlight a few excerpts that demonstrate how this workshop seeks to frame civic engagement for a broad audience. Next slide. Thank you. So here we are showing an example of the spectrum of civic engagement. I think we've modified this tool to include some more examples. But essentially what this graphic is showing is that civic engagement is at surface level about taking action. And it includes low touch to high touch actions, from individual to collective actions, from donating to a local organization, or even checking in on your neighbor as an example of an individual civic engagement action, all the way to, running for office, which takes more than just one person. It includes, organizing and building communities and all of those different components. So civic engagement exists on a spectrum of engagement, of action opportunities. And next slide. We are also framing civic engagement at its root about power, love, using power and love to achieve justice. So we have another video to show that we are including in our civic engagement deck. It's an excerpt from Where Do We Go Here, a speech from Martin Luther King Jr. And I'll have you play the video before we discuss.
And one of the great problems of history is that the concepts of love, what happened is that some of our philosophers got off base. And one of the great problems of history is that the concepts of love and power have usually been contrasted as opposites, polar opposites. So that love is identified with a resignation of power. This misinterpretation that caused the philosopher Nietzsche, who is the philosopher of the will to power, to reject the Christian concept of love. It was the same misinterpretation which induced Christian theologians to reject Nietzsche's philosophy of the will to power in the name of the Christian idea of love. Now, we got to get this thing right. What is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and that love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best. Power at its best is love, implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is love correcting everything that stands against love.
Thank you. So just to uplift one of those quotes, we'll return back to the slide. I'm just going to read this one more time. Power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. So we pulled this quote and frame it with this formula of power plus love equals justice. And really what we hope our participants get from this is that power without love will be misused, and love without power is not enough to create meaningful.
I feel like power is not something we actively talk about. Important for us to create space conversation can be engaged. So we're kind of dipping our toes in the water and really want to thank the team for finding this great video to get us started on that. So next we're going to be hearing more about the project implementation phase. And I know last time we talked a lot about how do we think about sustainability for these projects. So we're hoping to touch on that today, as well as just provide you an update. So Lexi Spencer will be doing that, and hopefully also will be joining our team soon.
Yes, thank you so much, Sarah. And if I could go to the next slide, please, that would be great. As you said, my name is Lexi, so thank you all for having me here, and it's great to see you all again. I know I spoke a little bit about the work that we're doing on project implementation at the last meeting, so I'm happy to pick that back up and talk a little bit more about the work that has been happening since we met. So while we are, as Benjamin mentioned, in the middle of our current second cycle of the People's Money, the participatory budgeting process, we are also in the middle of implementing the winning projects that came out of the last process of cycle one. So just to continue the conversation about this, I'm going to start with a pretty high-level overview again of some of the different types of projects that we have that are being funded, the focuses of those projects, and then I'm going to give some updates about the work that has been taking place since then. So in total, as we've mentioned before, this year we're funding 46 different projects across the 5 boroughs, with 13 of those focusing on boroughs as a whole, or being voted on through borough ballots, and 33 of those focusing on the tree neighborhoods that are part of the initiative through the Task Force for Racial Inclusion and Equity. So as you can see, of these 46 projects, the top issue and that were brought to light by community members and by voters through the process were mental health and job training. So we see a large focus on projects that specifically address mental health and job training, although we have a lot of different projects that focus on different areas. Some include education, food insecurity, health and well-being more generally, housing assistance, education, anti-violence, immigrant rights, sanitation, and then just some projects that are purely about fostering intergenerational connections and relationships. If we could go to the next slide, please. So in order to implement these projects, we are working with a total of 44 different community-based organizations. It's a lot, so I won't go through every single one of those, but you can see some of the folks that we're working with on the screen there, and we'll also have some people here later to talk about the work that they're doing, which is really exciting. So as you can see, those are some of the organizations we're working with, either at the borough or the neighborhood level, to implement these projects. Next slide, please. Since we last met, our contracted partner organizations have been conducting a lot of different activities to contribute toward the completion of these projects. And while, like I said before, we won't get to go through every single thing that every organization has done for each of the projects, I do want to go through some of the work and highlight some of the different activities that our partner organizations have done on these projects. So just to go through quickly, some of those, for example, include restorative justice circles for PS21 students in Brooklyn, asylum storytelling workshops for immigrants in Queens, intergenerational tech classes in the Bronx, financial literacy workshops for students at Bronx Lab High School, food distribution and food access expansion in Inwood and Washington Heights, mental health for first aid training, as well as gender-based violence and mental health workshops in Richmond Hill and South Ozone Park, culinary entrepreneurship for youth to get food handler certificates and to learn culinary skills, and more. And that last one is in Queens. So like I said, we're also going to have some of our partners who have implemented some of the work here and more talk about that. But we also did want to bring to light and have a discussion and conversation around sustainability, including what we're doing currently to promote and to encourage the sustainability of these projects, as well as what we can continue to do in the future to help ensure that these projects continue and can be implemented in different ways beyond the first cycle of this participatory budgeting process. Next slide. So just first also I wanted to highlight where you all can go visit on the website to get some more updates about each of the projects. So we have a page for project implementation on our website, which is participate.nyc.gov. And there are a few different ways, any way that you go that takes you to any information about phase 4 or project implementation will take you to a page where you can read about each of the projects, each of the organizations that are implementing them, and what they plan to do for those projects. So I encourage you all to go there to learn more about the different work.
Lexi, I just want to add in here a note on why this is important in terms of being able to go online, because it is part of adding to the transparency of the participatory budgeting program. And if you all recall, at the beginning of starting, our participatory budgeting work, we investigated, researched different platforms that would allow us to share the progress of the process as it was happening. And one of the reasons why we selected Decidum, the open source platform, is because it lets us, provide these kinds of updates. So we are going to be working with all of our partners and with the team to get this process set up. And this also involves things like user testing, for people who are interfacing with the site to make sure that, you know, things are understandable. So there's a lot of work that goes into seeing these projects on the site. So again, that's just another way that the team is involved in lifting this up. Thank you, Lexi.
Yes, thank you so much for explaining. And next that we're talking, and I said, one question that we have around what we can further do. So like I said, while these projects are currently only guaranteed funding through the first cycle of the participatory budgeting process, however, each of these projects is providing either a program or a service that was identified by a community as extremely important or something that was necessary to be implemented in that community. And that's sort of why we really want to make sure that this is at the forefront of all of the conversations that we have about what these projects mean and how we can continue them and work toward guaranteeing them to be more sustainable in the future. So some of the ways that we are currently working toward promoting sustainability are through project design, as well as through monitoring and evaluation. So just to talk a little bit about what we mean by this and the information that you see on the screen. One way, particularly through project design, that we see an avenue toward promoting sustainability is by involving community members in the actual design and the planning processes that go into each of these projects. So that can be done, for example, through needs assessments, and what that does is foster a sense of ownership, responsibility, and allows people to be involved in these projects in a way that are responsive and relevant to local priorities and make it so that these projects are viewed as important and necessary in the community. And that's something that we're doing by asking all of the organizations that we work with to conduct needs assessments and to get people actually involved in the planning process for each of the projects. That is also part of this larger idea or this larger process of monitoring and evaluation that we are also working toward with each of the organizations. I know we had our partner, Professor Mark Johnson from the New School of Public Engagement, come last time to talk also a little bit about what we're doing in terms of promoting monitoring and evaluation, and by providing monitoring and evaluation capacity building workshops to each of the organizations. What we're hoping to do is to foster partnerships, to integrate projects into existing structures, and to make the organizations stronger and give them the capacity to conduct monitoring and evaluation on these projects, as well as projects that they do in the future, to see how you can build in sustainability into the projects that you're doing, and also to help create an avenue for them to do advocacy for each of these projects. So monitoring and evaluation is a lot about how do you measure success, and why success is important is because what we want to do is take what we know about these projects, whether they're successful, and use that as an advocacy tool for them to have, and for each organization to work toward and to showcase, basically, to continue their work. So what we'll have is some final reporting, and we're hoping that that can be used as an advocacy tool for organizations to promote their work and showcase the success of the different projects, as well as the need for them in the community. Next slide, please. Just some other ideas of things that we can do to promote sustainability of the projects include more partnership opportunities, as well as some additional capacity building, maybe around areas other than we've already discussed. And we did want to open it up to a conversation. If anyone has any questions, any thoughts, any ideas from the commissioners, of course, if you would like to join in here, if there's anything glaring that you would like to add or that you think could be a really good way for us to think about monitoring and evaluation going forward on this cycle of the projects that we're implementing, as well as in the future when we do this process.
Do commissioners have any or thoughts about sustainability? We can also make this an ongoing conversation if you don't have anything coming to top of mind. And I think we need to do, try to look at ways that we can share out the projects also with our agency partners, as well as potential, sources of support in the philanthropy sector, just getting more on their radar as well with the successes of our programs.
Sarah, may I speak?
Yep.
If you want to form a subcommittee on this, I'm happy to join that, but I think it's, as you said, a bigger conversation than just making a comment at this time.
Sounds good. Eve, did you want to add something?
I'd be happy to join that subcommittee, but I just wondered the extent to which the projects were aligned with the budget priorities of elected, council members and borough presidents.
Yeah, so like figuring out ways to bring these to light to them as well and to get them involved. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That's a great, yeah. Great. Yeah. I mean, like Sarah said, we can always continue this conversation in the future. And we're also going to have some of our organizations talk.
She's joining us remotely, right?
Yes, that's correct. Mhm. And she has a PowerPoint presentation as well, which hopefully we can pull up. Great, thank you.
May I begin?
Yep.
All
Thank
right,
you so
great.
much, Amanda.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Aminta Kilawan Narayan. I am the founder and executive director of South Queens Women's March, and we are the implementing partner of mental health for South Asian and Indo-Caribbean youth and families, which was the winning project for the zip codes of 11419 and 11420 for the People's Money. You can go to the next slide. So just a little bit about South Queens Women's March. We are a hyper-local, intersectional, volunteer-led gender justice organization, and we're working hard to provide women, girls, and gender-expansive folks in our community with the tools they need to survive and to thrive. Among our work, we do mutual aid, period poverty, and food pantries are our most visible projects. We also do civic engagement work, building political power, youth and professional development work, art healing, and wellness workshops, specifically to curb gender-based violence in our community. You can go to the next slide. So we are super grateful to the New York City Civic Engagement Commission because we started out in 2020. We're pretty under-resourced organization, and as a result of our partnership from last year to now, we've been able to do so much to mobilize our community members from the ground up, from idea generation to coalition building, and finally to ballot collection. So you can go to the next slide. Idea generation, we convened lots of different community members who for the first time were getting involved civically in their neighborhoods. And it was such a beautiful opportunity for us to engage with folks across various backgrounds, socioeconomic statuses, et cetera, to think about what would be the project best suited or projects best suited in our community to be funded. Next slide. We also had, you can go to the next slide. Yeah, we also had an opportunity to build coalition, which for an organization like ours was a learning experience, but one that really allowed us to cultivate strategic partnerships with like-minded community-based organizations, civic leaders, et cetera. And ultimately, this coalition reviewed the ideas that were submitted and came up with some ideas as far as what would be featured on the ballots. You can go to the next slide. We did lots of outreach. And I think for us, when I talk about civic engagement, one of the hurdles we always find, especially in 11419 and 11420, is so many people in our community are undocumented. They want to get civically engaged, but they don't have the ability to vote. And so the People's Money allowed the opportunity for us to engage with all of those folks who often are disappointed when we're doing tabling and asking them to get involved. And it was so moving to see how many people showed up and out to exercise their civic duties in this way and to submit ballots, over thousands of people. And we often struggle with getting folks in our community to complete paperwork of this nature or any forms because of the reticence to do so due to their status and due to the stigmas around government. So this was a really learning experience for us, and we were able to engage thousands of individuals. You can go to the next slide. So ultimately, the winning project was mental health for South Asian and Indo-Caribbean youth. And we are so grateful to also be the implementing partner for CEC to roll out these workshops. We have conducted outreach on various different platforms, obviously on social media, but also to local small businesses, houses of worship, street canvassing, our e-newsletters, and more. We've been able to do this because we were able to bring on part-time staff specifically to resource this project, and we would not have been able to do that without the support of the CEC. Next slide. These are just some photos and quotes. I won't get into them because I know time is of the essence, but these are just some quotes from some of our facilitators, some photos of the workshops we've done so far in various locations across the zip codes, including at our office. This is our workshop on the intersections of mental health and gender-based violence. You can go to the next slide. And you'll see here, we've been able to engage with other community-based partners who have tabled at our events and provided resources for the services that they offer. We've had many moving experiences throughout this process thus far, including community members who've never really been able to uplift their mental health. And this is the first time that they're making a decision, a conscious decision to do so by coming to our workshops, which are all culturally responsive and facilitated by South Asian and Indo-Caribbean mental health professionals and other facilitators as well. So you'll just see kind of a broad strokes, all the things that we've been doing in the photos here. You can go to the next slide. This is just another one of our presenters, another licensed social worker who identifies as Ghanese, Indo-Caribbean, and did a workshop for us just a couple weeks ago. And next slide. In addition to our content-based, issue-specific workshops, we're also fostering wellness in non-traditional manners. On the left, you'll see our self-defense course that we held with Malika. We recognize gender-based violence as an issue, and self-defense, unfortunately, is something that we need to have at our disposal in terms of tools. So we convened this workshop. In the middle, you'll see a vision board session that we did as well, also to foster wellness. And to the right, you'll see a Zumba workshop that we did that was facilitated by an Indo-Caribbean Zumba instructor. And then the next slide. Why are these workshops so needed? In this community, obviously people voted, right? And this was demonstrated as the winning project for a reason. And part of why we believe at South Queens Women's March these workshops are needed is because there is in fact a high incidence of domestic violence in our community. A lot of the reason why South Queens Women's March was birthed was because of some high profile, really tragic incidents of domestic violence that resulted in suicide among the South Asian and Indo-Caribbean community. There's also a significant lack of mental health resources, and we're seeing this show up as a theme in pre and post surveys that we're giving to participants of these workshops, that they don't feel that they have a place where they can access mental health services and resources, that they don't know where they can even begin to sign up to get therapy, and they don't even know if without insurance they could afford to do so. There's also an intergenerational trauma that comes from the deep-seated the deep-seated results of colonialism that these communities have experienced. And there's a cultural stigma around accessing mental health. These are all things that we're seeing show up in the feedback that we're getting. And it just goes to show how important these workshops have been. The next slide. So again, like I said, we would not be able to do this work without the New York City Civic Engagement Commission and your support. We know these workshops need to continue. We know this work needs to continue beyond June, and just trying to think about the best way to do that, because we've seen such a wide reception in our community. And again, I just want to say thank you so much for giving me the space to share this work and to resource us, because this work is so important and we appreciate you all. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Aminta. We really appreciate you being here, taking the time, putting together this wonderful presentation, and for sharing about the work that you've done. Dr. Said, I think next we're going to pass to Linda.
Actually, Linda, are you okay with are you in a time crunch? Okay, if you're good, then we can finish up the two other partners and then we'll move to Linda, and that way Linda can have, her time afterwards. Yeah.
Perfect, great. Then next, I will pass it to Karina from Common Point Queens. Thank you so much as well for being here.
Good morning. My name is Karina Liu. I am the director of our Youth Opportunity Hub located in Jamaica, Queens. Common Point Queens has been an organization for a very, very long time, but we're very proud to have opened up our newest location that's right behind Queens Hospital, located on Parsons Boulevard. We have implemented with this budget our Young Culinary Entrepreneurship Training Program. The purpose of it and the impact that we're hoping to make is to enhance long-term financial security to approximately 150 youth, age 14 to 24 in the Jamaica, Rosedale, Queens South, and St. Albans area. The purpose of the program is a total of 8 weeks where youth have the opportunity to engage for 12 cooking classes as well as 4 business classes. At the end of the program of those 8 weeks, they get their certifications of completing the program, their Safe Serve certification, as well as startup kits and their $200 stipend. Throughout the 12 cooking classes, they get to work of understanding the culinary language, as well as some basic knife skills, and even getting the opportunity to actually cook some different meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner options. Sometimes the youth do get the opportunity to pick together on what they decide that they would like to cook within each class. The second half of the program, they do have the opportunity to participate in 4 business classes with an individual named Kanisha Dennis, who now works at Meta, formerly known as the Facebook company. She's the head of the Social and Influencer Partnership Committee. And she really works with them closely on understanding branding and marketing, and really just working harder as to find an alternative path. As nowadays, we do see a lot of youth that are looking for additional post-secondary options as they're in that 14 to 24-year-old phase. So far, we started our first cohort in November. We're about to complete our second cohort this week. So we have serviced 77 youth so far, and we still have a lot more cohorts to continue on. But the biggest part of it is the youth get the opportunity to not only engage in this enrichment activity and get their startup kits, but their Safe Serve certification is a really important aspect that we're noticing for any youth that is interested in the culinary field. Aside from that, I think I shared everything of what we have going on. Next steps is really finding additional ways of how we're going to continue on with the next cohort, as we do have now a Spanish-speaking executive chef where can hopefully expand this opportunity. And we're looking to open this up a lot more to our Spanish-speaking communities to participate in this opportunity as well. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Karina. That was great. It was great hearing about everything that you're doing. And then next, I wanted to introduce our partner at Unidad y Fe to come speak about the work that they're all doing.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ana Nieto. I am representing Unidad y Fe team. I would like to speak about the project, the winning project that was implemented in our Woodhaven community, the Immigration Resource Center, and the team at Unidad y Fe. We have been working together along with other organizations, building partnership to bring back resources to Unidad y Fe, such as Medicaid, how they could apply for health insurance, but we also focus on giving them information on how they could tell their asylum story, TPS, DACA, and other types of visas that they could apply. Outreach work, working with other organizations such as Sienna, the NYC Qualities of Life Foundation, and this past weekend we actually had Qualities of Life Foundation come to the Unidad y Fe and give the public some information on how they can do their taxes. We also did a storytelling workshop where our one of our team members gave the public information on how they could write a better, effective story, and just help the community to serve them. We see the great impact that this project, sorry, I'm a little nervous, has brought to the community, and being on one-on-one, face-to-face with the community, we see how this impact has, this project has brought forward the opportunity for current immigrants and newly arriving immigrants here in the community of Woodhaven. And this project has given them, I believe it has given them a great help, because even if it's just from really basic information such as helping them apply and schedule their New York City ID, to giving them stories on, not giving them stories, giving them information on TPS or DACA that they can apply for. We see the importance it is, because some don't have the tools necessary to apply for some of these basic things that might be basic to us, like, oh, get your New York City ID. Some people, that's a piece of cake, but to others who've just newly arrived to New York City and they don't know where to ask the questions or where to go to find these resources that can help them, give them a voice, and give them an opportunity to become part of society, and just open doors for them to find work and even just give their families a better life. And with the great help that you guys have given us working together, I believe that this project is giving and serving the community in a way that we see is very significant. And I thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to be here today and speak a little bit about the work that Unidad IFE has been doing. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of you. I really appreciate you coming here, telling the story of your projects, talking about what you've done so far, where your projects will go in the future, all of that. So yes, thank you.
Thanks so much. Do any of the commissioners have questions or comments on the projects? Anything you want to ask about? Natalie. The floor is yours, Natalie.
Thank you so much. So my question, which might be a little circuitous, it's probably not necessarily a question that our partners can address, but maybe contemplate, and maybe they can speak to it a bit. As just about everybody here convened may be aware, a recent decision in court negated the initiative to have non-citizen voting access in New York City, where we were expecting folks who were not citizens to have access to vote locally, school boards, on the local level, obviously not federal elections. And while misinformation and disinformation remains a huge challenge in general, it is my understanding that immigrants do pay taxes. They consist of homeowners, so they pay property taxes, they pay income taxes when they have wages that are issued in check form or the like. They pay sales taxes when they go shopping. Once again, it's my understanding that when we afford civic engagement to all folks who are residents of our city, it is because they are participating in civics. They're participating in community. They're taking buses. They're using schools. Is there, I guess, I don't need to ask if anybody has faced these challenges of these narratives, but is there any unified, let's say, initiative in the works, perhaps, to be able to address that specifically, that immigrants do contribute to our communities, and as a result, whether this court case, ends where it ends or not, that immigrants contribute monetarily and in other ways to our society, and that is exactly why we want to reciprocate with their ability to participate. It's complicated, I'm sorry. If I just opened food for thought without an answer, that's okay too. And I'll take my hand down while that gets pondered here.
I think you're making a valid point that probably as a team we could lift up a little bit more. And yeah, do any of the partners want to say anything about that, or? As our commissioner was just talking about how even though people who are not citizens may not be able to vote, they are still very active participants in our economy by paying taxes in particular. And those taxes also are part of the revenue stream for the city, right? And the city leverages those tax dollars to fund all of our public programs. And through participatory budgeting, we are returning, a voice and the money back to communities because they helped create the budget to do the work. Any of the other commissioners want to add anything to that? No? Mark.
Thanks. And thank you for the presenters. It highlights again the importance of the work that you're doing, and I'm now tying it back together with the slide on sustainability, because the needs that you're addressing probably won't be solved in 1 year, and so finding a way that the revenues that Natalie was talking about, the engagement that Natalie was talking about, funnels into the work that the staff does in engaging with our partners, needs to continue. I don't have a good solution right now, but if there is that sustainability subcommittee, maybe that would be a good thing to take part in, because it's obvious that the revenue that supports this year's activities needs to be replaced or supplemented. So, so thank you for that presentation and underscoring the importance of translating the influx of dollars to our city to sustaining programs that meet the vulnerable folks that you all serve. Thanks.
Okay, if there are no further comments, we'll turn next to our next and final presenter before we have a small window for comment at the end. I understand there's one person who signed up, so be sure to do that. Next, we wanted to hear from Linda Tigani, who is with the New York City Commission on Racial Equity. Equity is a really important focus for the commission, and we've been working with the Task Force for Racial Inclusion and Equity in our 33 neighborhoods for several years now. So I wanted to make sure that we heard from Linda about the work that she's planning ahead with the commission. So Linda, the floor is yours.
Time to hear from the commission. I'm excited to both share our mission and vision and also sort of forecast a little bit what we're going to be doing over the next few months. And please feel free to raise any questions as we go forward. So I'm going to offer some foundational concepts. So what are the key terms or ideas that are pushing me towards the work that I'm doing, share a little bit more about the leadership of CORE, talk through what are the mandates according to the New York City Charter, and then preview what's next. Before we get started, I want to share that right now you are meeting all of CORE. We are a one-woman show at the moment, but we're slowly building. I'm going to talk a little bit about our office. So all of that is to say this was never envisioned to be a one-woman show, but I'm going to do my best to answer all of your questions and just sort of share a lot of what you will see as what's next. And some of the ways in which we're currently interpreting the mandates is right now my interpretation. And I do expect that that will change as more commissioners come on board, as well as staff. So a little bit about our history. As you may remember, in March of 2021, former Mayor Bill de Blasio announced the Racial Justice Commission. This was during a time when our nation was experiencing a pandemic once in a lifetime. We were experiencing a parallel pandemic, which was mental health. We were also experiencing violence as well as protests to address racial and equity injustices across the nation that cross all different parts of our life, from health inequities to finance to housing. And so the city was also at a unique moment where it was time to renew our charter, to take a look to see what, if anything, we wanted to change, and the lens of and so he pulled together 11 commissioners, chaired by Jennifer Jones-Austin and Vice Chair Henry Garrido, and they looked at power, access, and opportunity, and went out and asked New Yorkers across approximately 2 years, what do we want to change about our New York City Constitution, understanding that changing the Constitution really means shifting power across the different elected offices and the way in which government works. And our city came up with 3 ballot measures that was proposed and then passed in November of 2022. The Commission on Racial Equity is one of the ballot measures. So as a quick reminder, we added a preamble to the New York City Constitution. We said that we wanted to measure the true cost of living and have that updated every 2 years. And then the third included a few different pieces. One was that New York City was going to open up an Office of Racial Equity. Every city agency and office is going to have a racial equity plan, and there will be a citywide racial equity plan. And then there will be a commission on racial equity. So the commission is an independent body that was designed and intended to advance racial equity in New York City government and increase community voice in government decision-making. Next slide. Next slide. So in order to do this work, I wanted to share a little bit about what guides me in my work and how does this relate to our New York City Charter. So the first ballot measure was to add a preamble. The city hadn't had one since approximately the 1600s. And so a new preamble is now included that essentially touches on these foundational values. So justly values all talents and contributions, ensures the condition of thriving for every single person, and embraces vigilance, remedy, and reconstruction. I also highlighted a particular passage that speaks to me, which is really to say that the work on the Commission on Racial Equity certainly comes out of the context and the history that former Mayor Bill de Blasio created with the commissioners, but it also stands upon the hundreds of thousands of people that take to the city every year to raise a particular injustice and propose recommendations, solutions, and strategies to government. And that this is not new. That work did not start during the pandemic. People have been taken to the streets over the entire lifetime of New York City. And so this work really rests on their shoulders. And that we do this work not only in honor of them, but also for the children and the future generations of New York City. And so for me, that passage, particularly honoring the contributions of those New Yorkers who have suffered in the name of freedom, and acknowledge all who fought, struggled, and dreamed for a better life and a better city. And together we stand on their shoulders. This also, I think, does tie into the most recent conversation in this particular meeting about our recent New Yorkers and our immigrants. And for me, this is also about them and their work, in that the people who take to the streets are all New Yorkers, regardless of their documentation status. Injustices have applied to many groups across racial, ethnic, gender, religion, and economic lines. And so I think we do this work with them and for them, as well as for those who came before us and for those who will come after. Next slide. So I'm not going to dive too deep into this one, but I did want to make sure that you all knew that our New York City Charter has key definitions that define equity and racial equity. And that's really important because it defines it not only as an outcome of our work, but also as a process. And the Commission on Racial Equity is duly focused on both the outcome of our policies, our programs, and our initiatives, but also in the process that it took to get there. What is it that we need to change in our policies and our procedures so that the outcomes will be equitable? And one of the sort of common misunderstandings at the beginning of community conversations is, what do we mean by, and sort of insert the word, what do we mean by race, by racial equity, by social injustice? And so the charter offers guiding light on that. I also wanted to highlight that they specifically define disaggregated data. This was a huge conversation during COVID that really unveiled all the ways in which many different communities were experiencing the pandemic when you got more granular to the data. And also understanding that data, disaggregated data, is a place where we can uplift and honor the full identity of every New Yorker. It is also a place where New Yorkers are seeking to be seen. And the example that I use often is the city's ability, willingness to both collect data as well as report on data for Indigenous community members. As New York City, we are home to the largest urban Indigenous community. And so it's my commitment that through CORE, we're going to work with our government partners and community partners to really uplift data for Indigenous communities, but for all communities that respect and respond to their full identity. So these are some of the core concepts that are going to be guiding our work. Leadership of CORE. So who's Linda? I wanted to offer a little insight into who I am. This is a new office. It's an extremely important commission. And so I wanted to share a little bit of where I come from and how I got here. I've been in government for about 5 years, and I've worked in various offices, all focused on advancing interagency equity initiatives that center family and children well-being. But personally, these are the particular values and commitments that guide my work day to day and that center me. So ending racism and human suffering in my lifetime. I would love for our children, for my children, not to have these fights. The second is advancing my people's fight to free ourselves and our oppressors. This language comes from several sort of leaders that have trained me, as well as folks who I've read, that really center self-determination, self-respect in my work. And so understanding that my day-to-day work is not only for myself, but my community, but also the who around injustice, to say that when injustice hits a community, it actually impacts everyone. People do not come to the table seeking to enact injustice. And when we recognize that and we're willing to come to the table in dialogue and in community, then we can release the oppressive conditions that impact everyone. And then centering and uplifting lived experiences and community in institutional transformation, in communities in institutional transformation. So this is about how our community members experience a policy. It is not how it is written, it is not what the intention is, but when a policy is issued, how do they experience the rules, the inclusion criteria, the exclusion criteria? What does that feel like and sound like to them? And that is then what I take to drive my work. And so these are principles that I've developed over time from when I was a youth justice, I would say worker. Maybe at some points I was SYEP in that organization. But at 15 years old, I started with environmental justice, and came back, and that's the last photo. I am not the only one running the commission. We will have 14 other commissioners as the executive director. I also sit as the chair of the commission, but we will have 7 commissioners appointed by the mayor, 5 appointed by the speaker, and each commissioner will be representing a borough. For both the mayor and the speaker, one of their commissioners will be designated to represent the voices of people under the age of 25. We will have 1 commissioner appointed by the public advocate and 1 appointed by the controller. I also wanted to highlight some language that's a little unique to the commission. We are able to move forward as a commission with commissioners that are currently in office. This is another way in which the city is moving to advance really the work of racial equity, the work of equity. Oftentimes commissions are stalled because of appointments, because it does take a long time, but CORE is able to move forward with our current commissioners, and I'm excited to say we do have a number of them that are on board and are diving into the work. Next. And lastly, we will soon not be a one-woman show. In our first year, we're expanding to be a team of 7. And I've outlined our organizational chart so you have an understanding of where we're putting the emphasis, particularly in the first year. So operations and administration, communication, organizing and engagement is going to be a huge one, which is why we have 2 staff in the first year that's dedicated to that area of work. Research and policy, general counsel will also be 1-person teams in the first year. And we will all be presenting very similar to the way in which you all operate here. We will have staff also present to our commissioners. The commissioners are going to guide and inform the work of each of these lanes, whether it be our community engagement plan or our communication strategy, and most particularly the research and policy evaluation that we're going to be doing. The next year, we're going to be able to bring on 5 more people. Okay, next. So the work that the commission is going to seek to inform over time, I'm just going to walk through some of our core mandates. The first is to identify and propose community equity priorities. This may sound a little bit similar to the work that CEC does. We're going to be working with, at this point, it's hyper-local groups. So we're working with tenant councils. We're going to be working with community boards, CECs, community-based organizations, and faith-based organizations to develop the city's first ever comprehensive community equity priority list. Those priorities will then guide the city's racial equity planning. So once they're done, we will hand them over to the Mayor's Office of Equity and Racial Justice, as well as both the mayor's team and the speaker's team, and say, this is what New York City residents say are their particular priorities. And then the agencies will go out and create a plan in response to those priorities. Once the plans are published, there will be both a preliminary and a final plan that's published. CORE to publicly respond. In the response, and if you look into the charter, it does provide more detail. We're going to be providing strategies and metrics for agencies to consider in their plan. Once the plans are set, our director report on agency and citywide compliance with the racial equity planning and process. We do not have a specific cadence noted in the charter, so that's something that we're going to create, but also want to take this particular mandate to say, within each equity priority, there will be plenty of city agencies that can contribute to advancing equity in that work. And so we are thinking of different ways in which to produce data that both qualitative and quantitative data that sits in community participatory action research, that is quick, can be used by community organizations for their own policy and advocacy work, and that certainly is youth-friendly, so that folks not only understand what is happening on a city level, but can engage. Then the last mandate, which I will say is the most exciting for community organizations, and I think is also pretty unique as a city, CORE is going to be set up to receive complaints about how agency conduct may have the effect of exacerbating a racial inequity disparity, and then we can make recommendations to address such complaints where appropriate. CORE itself is a body that does not exist anywhere else in the nation. There is no other municipality that has an accountability body such as CORE. This is also the first time that we will have a single place in New York City where complaints about policy can be directed. So this is separate from CCRB or CCHR that takes complaints about individuals. We will be looking at a particular policy that people will say either, if implemented, may exacerbate a health inequity or housing inequity or an inequity within social service. And then we're going to be working with the agency, as we are good government partners, to think through what are the ways that we can address it. Next slide. So underlining our mandates is really about community organization and our commitment to both being good government partners to our agencies and mayoral offices, but also to community members. And so the first thing that I did when I joined was go out to all of the RJC partners, so the partners to the Racial Justice Commission that led the education campaign, to flip the ballot and say thank you for their work. It's because of their work we have racial equity written into our Constitution. And so these are just a few of the community conversations that I've had so far, but certainly is not the exhaustive list. And my focus right now is about building awareness that CORE has launched, building support and optimism for our forthcoming community engagement plans, and then learning what actions can CORE take to build trust with those partners. You know, they were very clear when I met them. Many of them said, we don't know you. We want to get to know you. We want to hear your story and where you're from. But also we are going to be looking to make sure that if we make a commitment in a meeting, that you follow through as a way to build trust. And two things that community has asked for, which I've said yes to, in order to meet or really rather launch the last mandate around complaints, we're going to be launching focus groups with benefit navigators, advocates, community staff to better understand what are they hearing, as well as focus groups with their community members, so that when we both define what is a complaint, because that is not defined in the charter, and then think through what is a workflow process. We want to be able to do it according to what makes the most sense for community, what is the language that they are using, and what's a process that works for them. The next was to make sure that we update them. You know, our racial justice partners were very clear that they are committed to seeing the implementation of the commission, and they want briefings on how we're doing. So we will be doing community briefings separate from our commission meetings to go through some more finer detail with them. So next, I just want to share a little bit about how we're thinking to advance a citywide engagement strategy. Our commissioners specifically requested that we take a hyper-local approach. And so we're going to be working with local governance groups, in addition to being able to fund community and faith-based organizations, which includes the Tree Neighborhood Network through CEC, to participate in the community equity priority process. We're going to offer a public comment submission survey so that people can go online, whether they hear about us via Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, and tell us what their priorities are and have the opportunity to respond. And then the last is, and this is a working idea, we want to launch a people's policy table where we bring community members in the room with agency staff, with government staff, to co-create policy together, to co-design both agency policy as well as citywide policy. We are working to right now draft community equity priorities, and I'm partnering with the New York City Office of Economic Opportunity to frame our draft community equity priorities in an anti-poverty framework. Really understanding that both racism is core for capitalism to exist, for poverty to exist, and poverty really impacts a broad range of community all across the city and also allows us to dive deeper into neighborhoods where their demographic portfolios may have shifted, but there are still blocks within neighborhoods that are experiencing deep and extreme. This, I think, is also going to help us get at not only a broader range of racial and ethnic groups across the city, but also really focus on a range of age groups across the city as well. Next slide. So in order to get this work done, we are, in addition to meeting and working with community-based organizations, we've partnered with the Institute for State and Local Governance, and they're helping to provide some key landscape analysis to help us understand how are other municipalities tracking change and equity. You know, we're not the first city to have racial equity plans, but we are doing this in a fairly unique way. And then methods, models, and systems to archive community feedback. So one of the consistent pieces of feedback that we get from community is we consistently come to the table every time that you ask, but we do not see or hear where does our feedback go. And so I want to explore building a live, interactive community feedback archive on our website so that not only CORE can use it, but that organizations and advocacy groups can also use that. And I think that that ties into the way in which we're going to be sharing data, both our analysis as well as tracking and publicly reporting on the compliance with the plans. And lastly, they've offered support to come to the feedback sessions that and hear from community on what their recommendations are. They're going to help to finalize the community equity priorities once we have completed our analysis. And then this second part, launching the process to accept complaints. Right now, anyone is welcome to send CORE a complaint. We are up and running. However, we do want to make sure that this process is intentional and that it's transparent and authentic. And so to do that, we want to conduct focus groups. We're going to hopefully launch that work in either late March or early April or late April. So thank you. So that we can develop a community-informed definition of what a complaint is. And then on the government side, we will be coordinating with other departments such as CCRB or CCHR, as well as 311, to figure out how do complaints come into the city and what are the ways in which we can make this as less of a burden as possible on the community members. So this also is a slide just for you all to have handy. These are some of the ways in which we're going to be working that really grounds our work to complete the mandate. So who are some of the relationships we're going to be building, really understanding that CORE is an advancement in the practice of local democracy. And then there's always the opportunity, and we've explored this with a few organizations, to build out resources and toolkits to help standardize some of the ways in which we can integrate work into government processes. One example is to create a guidebook for government on how to collect and report on Indigenous community members. And that could be one particular tool that can be used by any city agencies that would also help to standardize data collection. So that's just one example of an idea that has been raised, but we are taking ideas from community members. And then eventually we will have we'll have a policy platform and potentially a legislative agenda, but all of that will come after we have the community equity priorities, so that we're ensuring anything that we put out to the public is first and foremost seen, approved, co-designed by community members who are coming to the table. So I did also wanted to offer a little bit of a distinction between CORE and the mayor's office. We now have two offices that are specifically in equity, although I would argue that we have many offices, including CEC, that also addresses equity in a direct fashion in their work with community. But the main takeaway here is that CORE is an accountability body. We are bringing community and government to the table as good partners and fair partners. in a commitment to advance the practice of local democracy. Mayor's Office of Equity and Racial Justice has a large portfolio of work that they do with many offices within, and their focus is really to set citywide strategies and goals, and they are the technical assistance partners to agencies. So we're actually just going to be working with agencies in 2 different ways. Next slide. Great. So what's next at CORE? We're going to continue onboarding new commissioners and staff. I'm excited to say we should have about 4 staff members and communication. If there's a group that you would like for me to meet with, to present at, I would love to do so. Please let me know. We will launch and finalize our racial equity priorities, and we're going to begin to develop our complaint process, those focus groups that I had mentioned earlier. And then we do have one final request in the charter, which is to respond to requests from City Council and the Mayor's team. I'm really excited to say that we are seen as good partners. City Council has already included us in some proposed legislation, particularly around our Truth, Healing, and Reconciliation Commission, which certainly falls nicely within the bucket of accountability. So I'm excited to move forward with that work. Okay, so thank you so much. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions.
Yep, we can take a few questions just for about 5 minutes or so if commissioners want to ask any questions or make any comments.
Sarah,
Suggestions.
this is Amy Breedlove. I just want to jump in. I had my hand up for the last round of comments, but after hearing Linda speak, I really need to say that the mission of this commission is to provide civic engagement for all New Yorkers. So while I understand the spirit of New Yorkers who pay taxes should be represented, no matter what their status is, I do want to caution that I don't think that this commission should get in on, those who pay for services should get them. I think what the mission of our commission is that all New Yorkers deserve civic engagement and participation in their government. And CORE's work is definitely upholding that and working towards that as well. And Linda, thank you so much for your work. I'm just wondering if a lot of the things you said about racial equity and poverty and Indigenous members of our city, if you are planning to educate the city agencies and commissions, including this commission, on a number of those aspects, which a lot of us are not fully up to speed on some of those issues and language, vocabulary, and narratives. One of the things that just came out is 1 in 4 New York City children live in poverty. So this is, extreme. And we have ratcheted down our voting to 11-year-olds and want more children to participate and make a lasting civic engagement participation. So this is not necessarily a question, but it is a comment that I would like the commission to seriously consider not taking up tax paying as something that we uphold or look toward.
Great, thank you so much. Certainly everyone, regardless of their documentation status or the way in which they contribute to New York City, is included at the table. We would never create any exclusion criteria based off of that. I would also note around language, vocabulary, and narrative, particularly around the fight against poverty, both for our children as well as our adults here in New York City. I think that's a really interesting note, like having a training of sorts. I think some of that will happen as we release the draft equity priorities, being able to uplift the language in the charter that creates the definitions. But to your point, I do think that more people need to be in conversation about not only what does poverty mean, but also what does it look like? And that poverty no longer looks the way that we think that it does. And there are lots of people around you that may be experiencing extreme poverty, may not have had a meal, may not have had a meal for over 24 hours, or may be at risk of losing their housing. And we need ways that are both trauma informed as well as leading with compassion to bring people into the conversation. And so that's a lot of the work that we want to do. There will be a separate narrative strategy that's developed around both the equity priorities, but the ways in which we work with community and how do we build momentum for the conversation on racial equity. I will say, I think this gives me the opportunity to raise a current challenge, which is that we are not talking about racial equity in the way that we were after George Floyd was murdered. And oftentimes when people take to the streets, it's after an egregious incident of injustice, whether it is due to a fatality, whether it is due to a housing collapse, or a spotlight on what you raised, right? The amount of children living in poverty. I want to get to a place where we're having this conversation without an egregious injustice having to occur. So we are going to launch a narrative strategy, but first our priority is to get to conduct some of trainings and conversations. And then lastly, I'll say this is also an opportunity for other commissions as well as agencies to say, because we're in a pretty unique position as an independent commission, folks can come to us and say, hey, Linda, can you do this? Can CORE lead these conversations? Can CORE bring people to the table or do a presentation or do a training? And I'm certainly open to all of it. We will only have a staff of 7 in the first year, but we will do as much as we can to also build a coalition of the willing across New York City to help reach those goals.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Oh, did you have Mitch? Yeah, go ahead. Final question.
Thank you, Chair, and also thank you, Linda, for the presentation. I was excited to hear about the goals and the values that was driving these goals. I speak on a piece about just education, just coming from the civic engagement side of things. It's about doing community research part, looking at the different racial equity priorities. You did mention earlier about focusing on the hyperlocal.
Yeah.
And I also appreciated the fact that you talked about bulking up the community organizing components of your team, right? That I would just have, right? If you're going to a lot of these hyperlocal neighborhoods and talking about their priority issues, many times folks, I would just like to incorporate moments of also educating them on the civic engagement process as well, right? Especially if your long-term goals is about systemic policy changes. When people go these listening sessions, they might anticipate immediate results, right?
Yeah.
Being the hyperlocal, like these are all these things that we have, no textbooks in the schools, et cetera, all these type of things. They can give you the entire laundry list, but they might think that, okay, after we share these things, there might be solutions like overnight, right? But if you're talking about these longer policy changes or resource allocation and all these type of things, it might take a longer process. So, if your team can also be mindful about folding those type of things about civic engagement, like in the knowledge of the processes, that might also be helpful for these communities that you're going to be working with. I also want to go for the record that I really like the idea of standardizing data disaggregation intake forms. I think that's something that would be great throughout all the city agencies in which we can track, particular gaps. So
Thank you. I will say I recently presented CORE to a group, and the first thing they said to me was, I've never learned so much about government. Really had nothing to do with CORE. I was like, this is great. Absolutely. But that really just speaks to your comment. I think we need more, and I'm committed to integrating more civic engagement education into our work. That's central. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Linda. We're really looking forward to working with CORE as and partnering with you as we move forward in this exciting work. Thank you. So before we end today, we do have one person who requested to make a comment, and that's Jerry Weinstein. So please, the floor is yours. If you could just go to the podium, please. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Jerry Weinstein. I'm on Community Board 6. Among other things, this was like adrenaline. I'm going to stack two questions, but they're not complex. Jobs that Benjamin brought up. I'm wondering about scope, because for example, housing, will these be confined to city agencies? Because I can, off the top of my head, think of Just Fix, Aaron Carr Housing Rights Initiative as lending so much to the discussion for people who need a baseline. The second question was, I know we're having budgetary challenges right now, but is there a long-term vision to increase the percent lit 5% of the budget? Thank you.
A crack at answering both of those. And let me know, team or commissioners, if you want to add anything. On the question of community board trainings, we have in the past worked with partners outside of city agencies to deliver trainings. We can continue to explore that. And for some of our trainings, that is still the case. I think we are also trying to do our due diligence to bring other agencies to speak to community board members, as well as when we work with agencies, it doesn't cost us. So there is kind of a budget issue in terms of like how much funding we have to give to partners to provide training. So we're happy to take your recommendations. Just be in touch with us on that. And then as far as like a longer term vision of growing the participatory budgeting budget, we haven't set like a percent target. I would say that we're really looking at this year is implementation partners. I think showing it's a proof of concept, showing that it works, that people are involved, they're invested, and that when people have a voice, they actually see results in their communities as part of the story that we know we need to tell to get to that point. So I don't know if commissioners, you want to add anything to either question or to the last question. Yeah.
Thanks for that. The push-pull, of course, is the need to address the perceived need for closing budget gaps with the reality that very compelling testimony here today about the work that is not being done, that is being filled in. The work is not being done by government, that is being filled in by community groups and partners. And we've teased them. We've given them a taste of what opportunity could be like, but we don't have the resources to continue their work without. So hopefully, what we're doing is empowering them to find the partners who can. If wishing made it so, then I think all of us would be expanding the budget the way that you suspected. I think the first goal, of course, is before you expand is to staunch the flow of losses. And so I think the most important thing right now is in hard times to recognize, assuming that these are hard times, that is to not lose ground, and then to look to make the growth part of the process. And community boards in their district needs statements and in their statements of budget priorities, which are also charter mandated, can be one of many voices in that regard. Participatory budgeting is a small opportunity in our city right now. Community boards are addressing the entire budget, not just the PB side of it. And so it would be appropriate for outreach to community boards to take up that issue and to highlight for them the work that's being done that they can then express as priorities for the coming budget. I guess we're already fixed on 25, so we're talking about fiscal 26 at this point, but that would be an opportunity to address that need and that growth opportunity.
Anyone else? Anyone on the phone or the video call? Okay. hearing no other comments or questions, since we're a little bit over time, I was just wondering, oh, one thing I want to note, we'll be sending out a poll for arranging the next meeting. And we won't be able to, I mean, we're trying to be thoughtful about everyone's schedules. And so one of our commissioners has a class at this time. So we probably, the next time around, will rotate the meeting time. So we'll send a poll for that. And yeah, I would love to, if there's nothing else for us to chat about, can I hear a motion? Anyone to second?
Seconded.
Anyone to? Thank you. So the motion to adjourn has been seconded. And everyone in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Anyone want to stay here for the rest of the day? Okay. The motion passes and I'm calling this meeting to adjourn. Looking forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.